我諗有啲朋友之前我哋嘅活動已經嚟過，因為我哋3月份其實係一連串嘅我哋忘記福島啦嚇，但係亦都去反省翻呢一個有核能冇就沒有和平呢一個問題嘅一連串嘅項目嘅。咁我諗呢個項目而家嚟到最後呢一個系列咧嚇，就即係一個高潮嚟嘅其實嚇。咁我哋好多謝有嗰啲咧就同我哋去講述日本幾十年同埋核能嘅呢個表前嘅一段嘅歷史。咁我諗歷史嘅問題，大家都講到核能咧，一定係要面對㗎啦嚇。究竟點解發生咗喺呢個世界之上嚇？係以核武啊，呢個核電咧嘅方式出現咧咁嚇。咁我諗大家都即係知道，當然呢個唔係只係日本嘅事。講到核能咧，其實佢嘅發展背景其實係一個全球化入邊嘅一段非常之黑暗嘅歷史嚟嘅。咁同日本啦，同所有嘅國家咧都有關，我諗冇人可以置身事外嘅嚇。咁現時大家都知道喺台灣方面，佢哋反核電嘅浪潮好高漲啦嚇。咁但係亦都有少數嘅聲音會提醒咧，大家留意反核電咧，亦都係要反呢個所謂核能和平使用呢個神話嘅，同埋呢個神話背後嘅甚至係意識形態資本主義嘅消費主義啊咁。以及咧當然就係呢個即係美國嘅帝國主義啊，呢啲都有關係嘅嚇。咁呢個其實係整個東亞太平洋即係都有關嘅事嚟嘅嚇。咁當然就住輻射對人類嘅生物同埋生物嘅傷害嚟講，咁呢個就更加係早就係全個，起碼係全個北半球都係有關嘅事啦。講兩句關於香港嘅情況嚇，大家我諗都唔會以為咧嚇，即係因為大亞灣啊呢個領澳嘅核電廠話叫做離香港50公里、30公里咁遠，又起喺中國嘅即係中國大陸嘅範圍之內。咁就同我哋冇關嚇，當然唔會係咁諗嚇。咁但係個關係係點咧？咁我哋去翻下佢嗰個大亞灣嘅網頁，你已經可以見到咧，佢已經講到明大亞灣嘅核廢料咧係要嚟俾中國政府攞去再提煉嘅嚇。咁再提煉要嚟做乜嘢咧？咁大家都知道啦，再提煉就係做核武嘅原料啦嚇，即係將呢個鈾238呢個鈈239嚇。咁何況又即係冇咩喺嗰啲即係所謂快速呢個增值嘅反應爐可以用翻嚟做核電，咁就係做武器就係呢個出路嚟㗎啦嚇。咁好啦，咁但係喺邊度做咧？呢啲武器喺大亞灣運咗去邊咧？我哋唔會知道啦嚇。咁但係最近如果你睇見有某一啲嘅角落入邊嘅報導咧，會話俾你聽河源廣東嘅河源之前啱啱地震過嘅地方，其實咧幾十年來都係有再提煉廠喺嗰度，再提煉廠喺嗰度就係再提煉做核武嘅原料啦嚇。咁亦都咧再翻查少少資料咧，你亦見到喺廣東嘅北部。廣東嘅北部嘅韶關，大家可能都有經過去過啦嚇。咁其實咧係有2個重要嘅鈾礦喺嗰度。咁所以咧其實一啲都唔遙遠嘅嚇，喺我哋廣東周圍咧已經唔淨止係話有核電廠，有各種嘅核設施、核武嘅呢個核電嘅咁樣嚇。咁我諗呢啲嘅距離咧，無論喺歷史上啦嚇，喺地理上啦，都係值得大家注意嘅。咁我哋今日就即係。差唔多要急起直追補下課啦嚇，咁就等 Professor Tanaka 同我哋講一講，即係一個歷史嘅一啲嘅因緣嚇，咁我哋從中咧就要學習啦。阿吳牧師係咪要講幾句説話？
各位朋友係歡迎大家咧係參加今日嘅講座啦，講下。咁我本身咧就喺基督教育進會裏面工作嘅嚇。咁因為日本福島嘅災難咧，咁我就先後就去咗2次福島咁嚇。咁一次咧就喺4月11號，即係早2年嘅時候咁嚇。就事件啱啱發生1個月啦咁嚇。咁所以咧係即係親眼見到嗰個嘅地震啊、海嘯嗰個災難，但係當然就俾我哋咧係入到核電廠嗰個區域裏面去睇嘅咁嚇。咁舊年年底咧，我就參加一個咧係響翻福島。當地啦，即係比較北部嘅地方冇嗰個 即係核輻射冇咁嚴重嘅地方咧，咁就召開一個咧係國際嘅會議啦，咁嚇，咁亦都係講即係核能嘅使用咁嚇，咁咧就我嗰個會議裏面其中嘅特點咧就係好多嘅福島人佢講翻佢自己嘅故事咁嚇。咁當咧係呢個海嘯啊，同埋咧係地震都慢慢過去，佢哋喺度重建緊嘅時候咧，佢哋最擔心嘅，亦都令到佢哋成個地區人與人之間嚇你可以話咧係有一個矛盾，甚至有時撕裂嘅咧，咁就係由於咧係對核能嚇有一個唔同嘅睇法嚇究竟留喺福島係咪安全？媽媽咧往往擔心過爸爸嚇，咁以至到咧其實佢哋裏面產生到嘅呢啲難題咧，我諗唔係咧係一兩年，甚至可能唔係講緊10年8年裏面能夠係解決咁啊。嗰啲小朋友開始咧有啲某種嘅疾病，通常咧都係即係同呼吸道有關嘅疾病啊，係比以往亦都多咗咁啊。咁亦都好多家長咧好擔心，究竟小朋友係咪因為輻射嘅影響，以至到有咁嘅情況咁啊？咁呢啲咧都係引起佢好多嘅憂慮㗎嚇，咁而呢啲事情咧就唔會係一時三刻係能夠係解決得到嘅咁嚇。當我哋舊年一齊開會嘅時候咧，就有唔少嘅學者一啲嘅朋友咧喺度分析嘅時候，都發覺咧其實我哋一般嘅市民都係聽緊一個嘅神話啊。咁呢個神話咧就係點講咧？就係話係和平用途、安全、乾淨同埋便宜嘅咁啊，咁所以咧係應該再多啲嘅咁啊。咁但係我哋好多人可能都會發現到咧，其實我哋生存喺亞洲咧，係因為核嘅緣故咧嚇，我哋嘅危機咧係比以往咧係即係更大嘅咁啊。咁啱啱早2個禮拜到啦咁有啲朋友咧從唔同地方嚟咧，主要係東北亞地區嘅。咁大家都分享咧各自教會嘅情況啦咁我哋其中最擔心一個就係北韓同南韓之間嘅關係。咁當然呢個有即係嗰個嘅核武器嘅問題喺度啦台灣同中國嘅關係其實都有呢個因素喺裏面啊，即係大家都希望加強我哋嘅武器，以至到對方咧唔會打先咁啊。咁而我哋嘅國家啦，即係我哋身處喺中國嘅裏面咧，我哋國家就講緊咧就話係即係一直都有咁嘅思想咧。自從嘅49年建國以嚟，就叫做超英趕美啊，即係超英趕美包括武器都要超英趕美咁啊。大家都知道我哋咧國家應該會越嚟越多嘅核電廠，亦都咧係越嚟越多嘅核武咁啊。咁我哋就生存喺一個咁嘅世界裏面咁啊。咁呢個神話咧，其實隨住福島嘅核災難，同埋再之前嘅切爾諾貝爾嘅核災難，其實即係爆完又再爆㗎啦。即係呢個神話應該唔再有人相信㗎。不過有唔少人咧繼續就話：我哋其實唔會再發生福島相同嘅嘢㗎啦。嗰啲好舊嘅核電廠嚟嘅啫，我哋依家嗰啲好安全㗎咁。唔知大家信唔信啦？咁就我就唔相信啦咁啊。咁所以我哋作為一個即係地球村裡面嘅人啦，其實我哋都係生存喺裏面，我哋都有一個責任嚟到改變我哋呢個世界，使到呢個世界更加和平、更加幸福咁嚇。咁希望透過呢個講座咧，我哋第一認識多啲，咁第二我都希望咧，我哋係能夠集結起我哋嘅力量上嚟講嚇，咁以至到咧係向整個世界講我哋嘅需要係啲乜嘢嚇。每一個人其實都有一個咁嘅責任講嚇。因為3月呢個會咧，我亦都碰到咧係台灣嘅一個代表嚟啦咁嚇。咁台灣嗰位牧師咧就同我講嚇，佢就話佢哋教會咧係全力推動咧，就係去示威啊，去遊行反對咧台灣建第4座嘅核電廠咁嚇。唔知成唔成功啦咁，但係佢哋會盡一切嘅努力啦咁嚇。咁佢話唔係今日開始㗎啦，佢哋從來都係咧都係反對㗎咁嚇。咁希望咧都我哋作為一個世界嘅公民咧，同樣都負起我哋嘅責任，為到我哋嘅世界，為到我哋嘅社會嚟到努力咁嚇。咁多謝大家。
喂，如果冇咧，咁我哋又開始啦。咁咧今日咧我哋即係好榮幸啦，請到田中理幸教授咧嚟同我哋講下核能喺日本發展嘅歷史。咁田中理幸教授咧係廣島市立大學和平研究所嘅研究教授，同埋咧係亞太學術期刊嘅統籌員。 咁咧佢研究範圍咧包括好多戰爭嘅唔同面向。咁啊其中出版嘅著作咧包括咧日本慰安婦啦、被隱藏嘅恐怖、日本二戰嘅罪行。咁啊今日咧就主要會集中咧核能呢個發電嘅所謂發電嘅方法，所謂和平利用核能呢樣嘢咧，點解會喺同埋點樣咧喺日本裏邊推行？咁我哋有請Professor。
Could you turn off the light? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and it'll be a great honor for me to be here and presenting my view on the nuclear issue. I'm sure that you want to ask many questions about the Fukushima disaster, but today I was asked to give a talk on the more historical aspect of the Japanese nuclear issue. That means how Japan became the nuclear nation. Despite the fact that you can see the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we had a disaster, and still we have many people suffering from radiation sickness. Although a number of the Avon survivors are decreasing very rapidly, however, we still have many people suffering from cancer, leukemia, etc. Yet, why on earth Japan started promoting nuclear use of the so-called peaceful use of nuclear power and became one of the largest nuclear energy nations? That question always comes up. Not just the people outside Japan, but people in Japan, Japanese people themselves. Didn't occur to ask this question until Fukushima accident happened. So anyway, let me start from the very beginning of the history of nuclear issue. Now, the German scientists called Otto Hahn and Lisa Meitner succeeded in the splitting atoms in 1913. This was the first time that was the experiment of the splitting atom was successful. And of course they knew, not only that those two scientists, but many other scientists working in this area knew that in the future they can produce enormous energy by using nuclear energy, either nuclear power or nuclear weapons. So unfortunately it went into the nuclear weapons first. So the first nuclear test called Trinity was conducted in Alamogordo, that's in New Mexico, in the United States, on July 16, 1945. Trinity, why Trinity? We don't know. Probably this is the power of the nuclear weapon is such enormous power, and therefore the only God can create such a power. So anyway, this was named by Robert Oppenheimer, who was the chief of the scientists working for the Manhattan Project, called Manhattan Project. That was the atom bomb development project the US conducted during World War II. But Oppenheimer regretted, after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, after the large people died, scientists always regret after disaster, and Robert Oppenheimer was not exceptional. So in 1960s, there was actually YouTube. If you want to have a look, the interview, Robert Oppenheimer in this interview, Robert Oppenheimer regretting what he did, and he said that I felt, watching that the nuclear test, I felt now I'm become death, the destroyer of the world. This was actually the words used in the Indian mythology called Gita, something like that. Anyway, he liked Robert Oppenheimer liked literature very much. So he quoted quite a lot of stuff from Shakespeare, Indian mythology, etc., etc., from the Bible too. So he named Trinity. So we don't know why he named the first part nuclear test of the Trinity. But anyway, so August 6, 1945, as you know, the Hiroshima was destroyed by the atom bombing early in the morning, and instantly, we don't know how many people were killed, but probably 70,000 to 80,000 were annihilated in 1 second. And then 140,000 people died by the end of 1945, mainly as suffering from leukemia and cancer, etc. But the peak time of the deaths of the airborne survivor was 1957 and 58, so more than 10 years after the bombing over Hiroshima. The major cause of the deaths in 1957 and 1958 is leukemia. So imagine that the people who were exposed to radiation, high radiation in Fukushima, we may have to think about, in 10 years' time, what will happen, or 80 years after, or 10 years after from now on. People will probably slowly starting suffering from various types of cancer and leukemia. Of course, the kids will suffer mainly from initially from thyroid cancer. Already, we've got 10 children found suffering from thyroid cancer. This is exceptionally, exceptionally high amongst the population, child population. 10 out of 200,000. It's a very high rate of the thyroid cancer. Anyway, so the Hiroshima was destroyed on August 6th, and then quite a lot of people, of course, survived. Not just the innocent killed, but despite the fact they were exposed to radiation, fire, burning, and etc., etc. But many people survived. And in Nagasaki, on August 9, 1945, so 3 days after the Hiroshima bomb was dropped, the epicenter was above the cathedral, the Uragami Cathedral in Nagasaki. So it's a coincidence that the Trinity, this was the name of the nuclear test, the first in mankind, and the second bomb was dropped above the cathedral. I don't know if it's coincidence or not. Anyway, so in Nagasaki, about 40,000 people died instantly, and 80,000 people died by the end of 1945. Okay. So, but then, after the war, the US started applying the nuclear science to different ways, not just the bombs. Okay, because they knew that in order to produce the plutonium, they of course operated the nuclear reactor. Okay? And they knew that the nuclear reactor created a huge energy. So they said they knew that they could boil the water and then use this boiled water to generate the electricity. Okay, So from September 1945, so a few months later, 1 month after the war, the United States already started talking about this, the use of the nuclear science for other purposes. And one other purpose was to use a small nuclear reactor to run nuclear submarines. Okay. And this was the Nautilus. This was the first nuclear submarines was produced after the war. Now, this Nautilus was carrying nuclear missile. In those days, there was no intercontinental ballistic missile, long-range rocket. So what they had to do was to carry a nuclear missile in the nuclear submarine and go close to the enemy's territory and launch the nuclear missiles from the submarine. Okay, that was the purpose of this nuclear ship, new submarine. And once the submarine goes into underwater, because of the nuclear energy, there's no need to receive the oil, to run the reactor, so that they can run for many years without supplying of the energy. So that was the purpose. They could go around in those days Soviet Union territories around the Soviet Union and launch nuclear missile. That was the purpose. And of course, they knew that the prototype of the nuclear reactor used for the nuclear submarines was later developed into the nuclear reactors to generate the power, and that was the as you know, the disaster. The result was a disaster of the Fukushima accident. The guy called Admiral Hyman George Rickover, he was a person who actually developed the nuclear submarine. And while he was developing nuclear submarine, he was approached by the General Electric Motors and other American companies to produce nuclear reactors for generating electricity. But the U.S. government initially was reluctant to give a permission to use this technology for nuclear reactor electricity, generating electricity. But anyway, the situation would change very rapidly because of the Soviet Union's involvement in nuclear test. 1949, August 1949, a Russian conducted first nuclear test called RDS-1, and this changed the whole situation up until 1949, so that 4 years the US enjoyed a monopoly of nuclear power. But after 1949, the same thing changed, and now the Soviets actually made an announcement that they did tests not because they wanted to use this nuclear bomb as a weapon, but for the purpose of construction. Of course, it's lie, propaganda, but they said, we will use this powerful bomb to, change the geographic, sort of situation. For example, they explode a mountain and make it flat, and make a huge agricultural land, etc., etc. So that was the announcement that the Russians made shortly after they conducted this test. And of course, the US had to do something about it. The United States, of course, knew that sooner or later this nuclear technology will, disseminate all over the world. So what to do about it? Okay, and Soviet also said that we will be very happy to give a technology to communist countries to develop these nuclear power plants. Okay. So the United States have to do something about it to encounter this kind of the Soviet activity. So, 1953, the end of 1953, December 1953, the United States made an official announcement that they will promote so-called peaceful use of nuclear energy. That was President Eisenhower made a speech in the United Nations General Assembly that this is the way that the humankind have to go. We have to utilize the nuclear energy for a peaceful purpose. And they said, well, he said that we are happy to help any nation, or so-called free world nation, to develop the nuclear reactors. Okay. So, Japan was also included in that, those countries. Okay, that the U.S. interested in promoting nuclear energy. But what happened in the March 1954? So the following year, only 3 months, or within less than 3 months, the U.S. tested the hydrogen bomb in the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Island. And the Japanese fishermen were irradiated. Japanese fishermen operated, of course, far away from the restricted zone. They were showered with the radioactive materials. Okay. That region that the Japanese fishing boats were operating, they were told that it was safe. There was no problem, that there was no way that the radioactive materials will fall, reach that region. It's very far away, too far away. But in fact, it's actually reached there. And so many Japanese fishermen were exposed to radiation, particularly the fishing boat called Lucky Dragon, number 5. All the fishermen were irradiated, and one died from the acute leukemia. Okay. Now that triggered a strong anti-nuclear movement in Japan. It was initiated by a group of housewives in Tokyo. They were concerned about the radioactive fish, so they didn't want to feed radioactive fish to children. So they formed the group and requested United States to stop nuclear tests. Okay. And this spread all over Japan within a very short period. And 36 million people signed the petition. 36 million means 1 out of 3 Japanese people signed for this petition. Okay. And 1 million people in Fukushima, Hiroshima, not just Hiroshima City, but Hiroshima Prefecture, 1 million signed the petition. Okay. So it's a very, very strong anti-nuclear movement. So imagine that the United States was just about promoting nuclear energy in Japan, and then this very strong anti-nuclear movement started. So what to do about it? So they have to think about the strategy, how to convert Japanese people's mind, and make them to agree with the use of nuclear energy, or make them to to use the nuclear energy. Okay. So, a guy called Thomas Murray. Sorry, this is just to separate them. Thomas Murray was the very powerful member of the United States nuclear nuclear energy committee, and he said that and on September 21st, 1954, he was invited to Steelworkers conference, and there he made this speech. Now, while the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki remains so vivid, construction of such a nuclear power plant in a country like Japan would be dramatic and Christian gesture, which could lift all of us far above the recollection of the carnage of those cities. In this way, we would be giving substance to the divine command that we forgive our enemies, and we would demonstrate to a grim, skeptical and divided world that our interest in nuclear energy is not confined to weapons. So that means we are Christians, we are generous, so we give a gift of nuclear power plant to Hiroshima. Okay? All right? Very kind. This is a Christian, generosity. So this was at September 1954, and in the January 1955, Sidney Yates he was a senator of the U.S. Congress. He made a proposal in the U.S. Congress that we have to provide this, the nuclear energy, nuclear power plant to Hiroshima. So, and in the case of Japan, what more concrete expression can we furnish of our friendship for the people of Japan and our desire to help erase the asserting scars which the war-born atom brought to them, and to make available the miracle of the atom, fashioned in peace and designed to help them overcome a harsh disposition on nature's resources. So he said that initially he thought that he was proposed to build the hospitals for the airborne survivors in Hiroshima as a gift from the United States. But he thought nuclear energy would be far more useful than a hospital. So he said, we should give a present, nuclear power plant as a present to Hiroshima. But this was just White House was quite a different approach they had. This is Gerald Smith. He's the special assistant to the Secretary of the State. He stated in his secret memo that I found in the U.S. archives. It said that he said, this is absurd. If we decide to give a nuclear power plant as a gift to Hiroshima, that means we admit our guilt. That guilt that we bombed Hiroshima and killed the people. So it's not a good idea. He said it will be boomerang. If we build the nuclear power plant in Hiroshima and then produce the plutonium there, and the plutonium will be sent to Japan, the United States, and if we create more nuclear weapons, that would be that would be far more dangerous. Will be exposed to criticism. So that was not just a Gerald Smith's idea, that was Eisenhower's idea. So what's going on? The Nuclear Energy Commission said that we are happy to give a nuclear power plant to Hiroshima, but the White House says no. So there was a different ideas. But the Nuclear Energy Commission was not seriously thinking of giving a nuclear power plant to Hiroshima. No, this is just a propaganda. Okay? There was no way that they were, seriously thinking about building a nuclear power plant in Hiroshima. Okay? It was just a propaganda, okay, to change the mind of the people in Japan, particularly airborne survivors. If they would be successful, change the airborne survivors' idea and say and make the airborne survivors support nuclear energy, it would be tremendous moral support for the United States. Okay? So that was the purpose. There was no way for them to actually, give a power plant to Hiroshima. It was sheer propaganda. Okay? Well, then, how the people in Hiroshima reacted? Most people actually welcomed. You may surprise, but most people welcomed it. Well, if it's peaceful use, why not? Mayors, for example, Hamai, at that time, then Mayor Hamai himself was an airborne survivor. And he said, this would be a great idea. One of the very few people who actually objected to this idea was Professor Moritaki. He was also an airborne survivor, but he was a philosopher. And he said that if we built a nuclear power plant here in Hiroshima, it will be a target of the military attack. So we can't have this. And also he said that in those days it's very rare statement that he said, he said that what we'll do with the nuclear waste comes out of a nuclear reactor. In those days nobody thought about the nuclear waste. But he was the only very few people who actually questioned what will happen to the nuclear waste, produced out of this nuclear reactor. But by the end of this year, the 1955, this debate was gone, because you see, as I said, the purpose of the Nuclear Energy Commission was to change the mind of the Japanese people, particularly the airborne survivors. And in that sense, it was successful, because by and large, the airborne survivors in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they actually supported so-called peaceful use of nuclear energy. You may wonder why, but I'll come back to this, why they supported this view. Anyway, but then I have to say that behind this scheme, the CIA was involved. Okay? CIA was actually planning all sorts of strategies to change Japanese people's idea and make them strong supporter of the peaceful use of nuclear power. I can't find any evidence, concrete evidence, because if you go to the US archives, there's virtually actually there are very few documents provided by CIA. Okay? CIA does not give up the documents and give it to the archives. So only very few archival documents created by CIA is available at the US National Archives. Anyway, so in December 1955, by the guy called Matsutaro Shoriki, he was the president of the Yomiuri newspaper and Japan TV. Japan TV Corporation was recently, set up, and it was the beginning of the sort of TV broadcasting time, in Japan, 1955, and it's only one TV channel in those days. And he actually used so-called idea of peaceful use of nuclear energy using his newspaper and TV. Okay. The Yomiuri newspaper, every day, day after day after day, they actually promoted this peaceful use of nuclear energy. Okay. And he was supported by CIA. CIA actually, secretly supporting Shoriki's activity in Japan. I can say this because the U.S. information service called USIS. USIS is still, operating all over the world. USIS was operating in Japan in those days, very, very strongly. Headquarters in the embassy in Tokyo. And they have a branch offices, various places in Japan, Kyoto, Osaka, Nagoya, you name it, including Hiroshima. Okay. And USIS documents, all documents available at the US National Archives. And I found those archival documents and said that they were collaborating with CIA. So anyway, Shoriki was supported by CIA and USIS. And in 1955, December 1955, the United States held the exhibition of the peaceful use of nuclear energy. This exhibition, Atoms for Peace exhibition, went all over the world, not just to Japan, Europe, South America, you name it. Okay? A huge exhibition. And in Japan, Shoriki actually first had this exhibition in Tokyo, funded by the Yomiuri newspaper and Japan TV Corporation. You can see that, many people queuing up to go into to see this exhibition. Okay. Now, after the Tokyo exhibition, this exhibition went into Nagoya, Kyoto, Osaka, and Hiroshima. Initially, the USIS was planning, and the United Nations, the US Nuclear Energy Commission was planning to hold the exhibition first in Hiroshima. I don't know why they changed the ideas, but it started from Tokyo. Okay. So in Hiroshima, in 1956, in May, for 3 months, started. Now this is the photos that in Hiroshima. Now they've created a huge panel that shows how nuclear fission works. So the lights goes up and tells this nuclear fission. And they also brought actual size, life size of the nuclear reactor. This is a model, and show this, the inside of the nuclear reactor, the structure of the nuclear reactor. And many people came here. In Tokyo, 367 people came. In Hiroshima, 100,000, more than 100,000 people came to see the exhibition. Okay. Now, this is Hiroshima. Now you can see this panel that the lights going on, off and on, and the school kids, children, came to see. Okay. And the venue that they used in Hiroshima was Airborne Museum. Airborne Museum was built a year before, in August 1954. Okay. So in 1955, 1955, August 1955, and in 1956, they used this building as a venue for the Atoms for Peace exhibition. Okay. Now they moved the entire exhibiting items on air bombs into different places, and filled with the exhibiting items of the for the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Okay. Including this model of the plane. I mean, this is absurd. There's no way that you can use, the nuclear energy for plane, jet plane, because you see, you need a huge amount of water to cool down the reactor. How can you, use this reactor for the plane? But anyway, they said in future this will be available. If we work very hard, it will be feasible. So they brought this model, okay, and then hanged from the ceiling. Oh, sorry, this is the one. Now, the other thing is that they made this colorful pamphlet. In those days, you see, the color pamphlet was very rare. I mean, I was a child, I was 7 years old. There was no way that I mean, for us, that the free booklet like this, is given to. But this was tens of thousands of copies were printed and given to the visitors. This is the panel that you see. This is light going on here. So this was a huge exhibition, and if you can see the inside of the pamphlet, you can see what kind of things. The most attractive things for the people in Hiroshima was the isotope machine. Okay, they actually brought the actual size of the model of the isotopes, and then they said that we can cure your cancer, leukemia, and the scar that you had because of the radiation with isotope. This is the peaceful use of nuclear energy. So they said, you have a wrong imagination. The weapons. It's just one way to use nuclear energy. We can use, the nuclear energy for various other purposes, so-called peaceful use of nuclear energy, and this will help you. And this was the most attractive thing. They thought, wow, this got the magical power. This will cure us. So why can't, we can say, why can't we say this is the way we have to do it? So this was very attractive for the Hiroshima and Nagasaki people. And all other things, for example, if you expose the radiation to egg, the egg becomes firmer, so it's easy to carry them, and so on and so forth. I mean, this very simple manner. In this very simple manner, they explain this, how useful this radiation is. In the 1950s, so the Hiroshima was exceptionally treated because of the after the exhibition, they were told that you can choose any exhibiting items. We give it to you. So, they were given various exhibiting items, okay, for free. Only Hiroshima was this kind of offer, okay. Anyway, so they were happily received many items, which was exhibited at the Items for Peace exhibition after the exhibition. Okay? After the exhibition, went all over Japan, and then they were received. Okay? I'll show you the things that they received. Anyway, so 1958, they had a big event called reconstruction, celebrating reconstruction of Hiroshima. So by 1958, the Hiroshima city became, well, more or less reconstructed. Okay, including this old castle. It was completely destroyed, of course, by the bomb, but then they recreated with concrete, and also they made a huge boulevard called Peace Boulevard, 100-meter wide, And also, this is the Airborne Museum. Okay. So they have this commemoration of the reconstruction of the Hiroshima, kind of exposition. And so they made, you know, this kind of exhibiting, what shall I say, displays, you know, what, it's like a Disneyland things, but they have a electricity buildings, and etc., etc. So again, they use the Airborne Museum as the nuclear science building. Okay. Magic hand and draw this kanji, the Chinese character, and then lift up and show. Okay. So the school children came, led by a school teacher. So imagine, I mean, this is the technology. They thought, they were told that nuclear energy technology is such advanced. So people thought, wow, with such the advanced technology, well then the nuclear power technology must be good. And as I said, the radioisotope, etc., etc. So they're totally brainwashed. Okay. Now, there must be somewhere that the Airborne Museum still holding this, the machine. And I asked where they are. I said, well, we don't know. I said, they said probably they're ashamed, but nobody would probably, get this kind of thing. So somewhere in the storage, this machine is sleeping. Anyway, so 1955, as I told that because of the strong anti-nuclear movement in Japan, the first world, the conference against the atoms and hydrogen bombs in Hiroshima. This was 1956. Okay, but strangely, at this conference too, they actually supported the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Okay. I told you that the group of women housewives in Tokyo started this campaign. Okay. Now, when they expressed their concern about the radiation on food, okay, they actually asked the United States to concentrate on atoms for peace. They didn't object it. They said, we want to see nuclear energy to be used for peaceful purposes, not the nuclear weapons. Women said that. Okay, so all over Japan, I think partly because of this Yomiuri newspaper propaganda. Okay, of course behind that, as I said, CIA was involved. Everyone thought, we have to use nuclear energy for peaceful purpose. Okay. Not only Japanese, but also the delegates came here to, from all over the world. You name it. Americans, British, Brazilians, you name it. People who came to this conference, they all supported. Italians, including scientists, top scientists. Okay. Now, in Japan, we pretend that we are the victims of the atom bombs. Of course, we are the victims of atom bombs. But we are also working in the development of the atom bombs during World War II. People don't know that very much, Although the budget available for the scientists who are working in this area is very small compared to Manhattan. I mean, it's just a, droplet in the water or something. It's very, very small budget. So there's no way that they could develop the nuclear weapons in World War II time. Yet they're working. The chief of the scientists called Nishina,
he was very eminent scientist, and underneath Mitsuo Taketani and also Yukawa. They were mainly working in the theory. Okay, although they got the machine to produce the the radioactive materials, but the Yukawa was mainly working on the theory. And after the war, he was awarded Nobel Prize in physics. Okay. He was the first person, the Japanese first Nobel Prize winner in physics. Okay. And strangely, they also, after the war, they said, well, this is the way that we have to go. The nuclear atoms of peace. That's the only way, we can survive. Because the oil and coal will run out in the future, and nuclear energy have to be utilized. Okay. So these people all supported the Japanese government policy to use nuclear energy. Okay. And they never said that they were involved in the research on atom bombs. They never said that. But I mean, for example, the Yukawa was a very strong anti-nuclear campaigner until he died. He was well known as a peace activist, not just a scientist. But he was a promoter of the nuclear energy. Okay. Taketani was different. Taketani suddenly, 1970s, he changed his mind. And he went against the nuclear energy too. But many other scientists will say nuclear energy have to be utilized for the benefit of mankind. Now, you know that the backwash, the scientists, the physics scientists, and they, after the war, they got together and they said, we have to against nuclear weapons, okay? Including Einstein. Okay? So they gathered in Canada, and this was the first meeting of this backwash scientists in Canada, and they started this campaign against nuclear weapons. Yet, these scientists also supported the use of atoms of peace. They never against the nuclear power plant at all. So it's not just a Japanese tendency that we supported the nuclear energy, but this was actually worldwide phenomenon. But nonetheless, it was a fact that the airborne survivors were exploited for the purpose of promoting the atoms of peace. And somehow, the airborne survivors somehow tricked, and they strongly supported. So until Fukushima accident happened, airborne survivors never went against the nuclear power plant. Strange. In Hiroshima, for example, it's only 80 kilometers away from Hiroshima City. We have planned to build the Chugo power plant. A local electricity power company is planning to build the nuclear power plant. Okay. It's only 80 kilometers away from Hiroshima City. Yet, this plan was going on for many years. Yet, that the Airborne Survivors Association never expressed concern at all. Until Fukushima accident happened. And then they changed. Although it took a few months until they changed. There were several, about a dozen people in Fukushima region, that airborne survivors were living when the accident happened. Because originally they were from Fukushima. They happened to be in Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the time the bomb was dropped. And then after the war, they returned home. So they were living in Fukushima. And they all admitted that they actually supported building nuclear power plant in Fukushima. Okay. Now, not only that the United States not only exploited the airborne survivors, but also the scientific research on radiation problems, effect of radiation on human beings. 1960s, from 1960, well, before 1960s, sorry, 1950. Before 1950, the Americans came to Hiroshima and in Nagasaki and started doing research on the effect of radiation upon human beings, human bodies. But 1950s, they properly started this research called ABCC, Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. They built the laboratory in Hiroshima up on the hill, called Hijiyama, and top medical scientists and radiation specialists came to Hiroshima and conducted research. They surveyed airborne survivors, but the airborne survivors hated them because they never gave treatment. They just only surveyed, but they gave money. In those days, the very poor condition in Hiroshima, particularly airborne survivors, who were suffering from airborne disease, they could not work, so the money was quite attractive. So even a small amount of money was given to the airborne survivors if they come to this laboratory and agreed, that they would be examined. So the tissues were taken, and all data were recorded. When they died, actually, they also paid a cost of funeral. It was just a small amount of money, but the body was taken to this place and examined. Anyway, so they were actually saying that only within a 2-kilometer zone, the radiation was very high. Only 2-kilometer zone. And of course, there were many survivors. I told you that many people survived in the bombing of Hiroshima, and they were exposed to more than 100-meter sea depths. So some of them 300, 400-meter sea depths, but they still survived. We don't know why, but many people died, of course. So what the US came up, the ABCC came up was up to 100 meters exposure to 100-meter radiation. There's no problem at all. But the problem was they were only examining the external exposure to radiation, means the body, radiation exposed to your body from the outside. They never examined the internal radiation. Irradiation. That means you inhale dust, radioactive dust, and goes into the lung, stomach, and the other part of the body. They never examine it. But the internal irradiation is far more dangerous. But they never concerned about it. Not only that, there's a black rain, very radioactive dust called black rain. Fell off very wide region. But initially, the US, the ABCC said there was no problem at all. It's only 2 kilometers on. There's the black rain. There's a very small amount of radiation, so there's no problem at all. Okay? But so that for many years, airborne survivors had to fight to be, that their problems was caused by even low level of radiation because of the exposure to the black rain. So they fought, and up until, so now, from epicenter to 19 kilometers, this region, if you're in this region and exposed to black rain, you are acknowledged as an airborne survivor. Okay? Yet, there are many other people who were exposed to radiation. This region, this wide region, the black rain fell. But still, these people are not acknowledged as officially acknowledged as airborne survivors or the victims of radiation. Okay. Probably they're exposed to, I don't know, 20-meter seabelt or 30-meter seabelt, quite high. But the problem was, because the ABCC's research result became official and 100-meter seabelt is acceptable, that was IAEA also adopted. Okay. And International Commission of the Radiation Protection also used this ABCC's result. So the ABCC, of course, the International Commission of the Radiation Protection say that the 100 meters is too sort of excess, and they said only in the emergency case it should be acceptable. So because of this, the IAEA and International Commission of the Radiation Protection standard they take. The Japanese government said that after the Fukushima region, the accidents at 20 meters seabelt is acceptable for children. This is for children's sake. So of course that the housewives and especially mothers, got angry, and they said eventually that the Japanese government said, okay, we'll accept that your request, and they said 1 meter seabelt. But in Fukushima, it's now the 5 meter seabelt. It's everywhere. If you go to and measure the 5 meter seabelt, you can find everywhere the 5 meter seabelt. So it's quite high. And in the Chernobyl area, if it's 5 meter seabelt, if you can't find the 5 meter seabelt radiation level, you are entitled to move out, and the government have to pay for that. But the Japanese government, they are encouraging people to go back to the 5 meter seabelt level of radiation zone. This is criminal. But anyway, so the problem, the source of the problem comes from this Hiroshima. The Hiroshima result was again exploited by the Americans and Japanese. And this is now still used for the nuclear disaster in Japan. I think I better stop here. So anyway, what I want to say is the use of nuclear weapons and nuclear energy both are a crime against humanity. People think, well, why on us you think the nuclear energy is a crime against humanity? It is, because if an accident happens, indiscriminately, affect the people. Large number of people are affected by radiation. Although probably, unlike the atomic bombing or nuclear weapons, people don't die instantly, but in the long run, many people die because of cancer, leukemia, etc. So I think this is a criminal act. This is an indiscriminate mass killing. This is obviously this is a crime against humanity, in my opinion. So anyway, I better stop here because half an hour ago. Sorry.
田中理教授，咁啊同埋我自己睇個印象最深就係啲相，咁啊即係好小心咁揀出嚟，同埋好多未見過。咁啊而家就大家有咩問題或者有咩意見想發表啊討論啊，隨時舉手。我係傾下偈。咁 講廣東話或者英文都得。
May I ask, Professor? May I ask, Professor? What's the prognosis of the Hiroshima bomb? That means, is it because it is an atomic bomb that detonates quickly that the radiation was much lesser than those in Fukushima? Have you compared the radiation fallout from Fukushima incident and the Hiroshima one? And have you compared the data and what kind of findings do you find?
I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell that. I'm a social scientist. But according to the scientists, specialists, actually the Fukushima, the amount of radiation released from Fukushima region is probably several times of the radiation released from the atom bomb in Hiroshima. And also the problem, not problems, shortly after the bombing of Hiroshima, the typhoon came, and the very heavy rain washed away the radiation from Hiroshima into seawater. So it was relatively clean. Hiroshima is relatively clean. Immediately after the bombing, well, not immediately, shortly after the bombing of Hiroshima. So that's why, so that, for example, September, I think it's early September, so it's only a few weeks later that, the rain came and heavy rain washed away. That's why the Hiroshima City Council only accept the people who are exposed to radiation within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks after the bombing, they came to the city. They were officially acknowledged as airborne survivors. Means airborne survivor means the people who are exposed to radiation. Not just the ABCC's result, but also because of the typhoon and the rain washed away the radiation. So they think that the people who came a long time after the bombing, there'll be no way that they're exposed to any high level of radiation. But Fukushima is different. But Fukushima, the number 3 reactor, they use the MOX. MOX means the plutonium and mixed with the plutonium. And that was highly radioactive. That wasn't, nothing like a Hiroshima. And actually, the wind actually blew, this radioactive material, MOX, radiation, to north first, and then the went up to Iitate, Fukushima City, and then the wind direction changed towards southwest, and that contaminated Koriyama, a few other places. So this is a strange thing that if you go to Fukushima, you find a so-called hotspot area in a different places, and in between the power plant and Koriyama, in between very low level radiation. Although this region is closer to the power plant, the Koriyama is far more, the radiation level in Koriyama is far higher than the other region because of this wind direction, wind change.
Can I follow? Thanks for your comparison, but if you compare and say that Hiroshima has rain to wash away the radiation, and how about Nagasaki? Have you compared the case of Nagasaki?
Nagasaki is a different, because Nagasaki is there's a high mountain, and a very narrow region, and so they are exposed to more, sort of high level of radiation. Okay, that's why I told you, I've forgotten to explain to you. Go back to this guy, Yamashita, Professor Yamashita. He's a radiation specialist at Nagasaki University. Okay, he said that the like I say, 100 millisieverts is nothing. It's nothing. You know, he said up to 500 millisieverts is okay. He said, you know, you don't need to worry about it. The best way to avoid the radiation sickness is to just laugh. I mean, this is a laughable comment, but this is the fact. This is, you know, he actually said that. The reason why is that Nagasaki, you know, people are exposed to, you know, higher level of radiation or high level of radiation and survive. And also he is using this ABCC's research result and saying, you know, there's no problem at all. So Nagasaki is relatively high because, but the mountain actually blocked the, you know, the radiation exposed to other regions. Although black rain, some black rain went the other side of the mountain, but it's not like Hiroshima. Hiroshima is a lot wider.
教授有冇任何嘅研究咧？有冇任何係有關受輻射污染嘅生物佢嘅影響，特別喺生物鏈裏邊，然後生物鏈裏邊再係遺傳嘅影響？ 有冇？
Just translate after that because it's easier.
呢方面嘅研究嘅咧？
可以咁講。
So, Professor, is there any research about the radioactive contamination about the food chain and the subsequent genetic mutation?
Again, I'm not a scientist, so it's difficult to say. But of course, that as I said, the internal irradiation is the problem, because if you eat radioactive food, then automatically you are exposed to the very high level of radiation. And so people in Fukushima are particularly concerned about the food. But the problem is, the Japanese government propaganda, you know, they're always saying that they find no, you know, risk amongst the food produced in Fukushima. I don't know whether it's true or not. I mean, for example, the shiitake, you know, these mushrooms, that's the most, according to scientists, that's the most dangerous food that you eat. The Fukushima is very actually the famous because of the producing large number of shiitake, and so. But the scientists always said that don't eat shiitake from Fukushima. So the people stopped buying shiitake from Fukushima. But then we didn't know that the you know the wood stock to grow the shiitake, woodstock was sold to other regions from Fukushima, for example Hiroshima. So the local farmers in Hiroshima actually growing shiitake using this imported woodstock from Fukushima region, and we were eating. So we didn't know that. And the Fukushima was very famous because of the many other products like peach and the dairy farms, you know, the cheese, milk, you name it. Because you know, the 60–70% of the Fukushima products were agricultural products. The income, as far as the income.
So the kind of the devastating effect on the farmers in Fukushima. So they're now trying to get a compensation from TEPCO. Some farmers are very successful. The farmers, the association, as a group, if they negotiate, they are successful. But if you're an individual negotiator, they're always neglected. So if you don't belong to any farmers association, there are various farmers associations in the Fukushima region. And if you're just acting as an individual, there's no way that you can get a compensation. They pull on. They give you, very comprehensive documents that you have to fill out. Take ages to fill out the form. So they're trying to somehow avoid paying compensation. So it's incredibly, sort of sad stories that you hear. Well, many farmers actually committed suicide. Yes. So the other thing is that we don't know is the large amount of radioactive water is actually released from the power plant. And TEPCO is not giving information how much actually they are releasing. For example, every day 40 tons of water, radioactive water, has to be stored. Every day, 40 tons of radioactive water coming out of the nuclear reactor because they are cooling down the nuclear reactor, and it's a circulating water, but still, because of the meltdown, the water actually comes out from the reactor, so they have to store it. And if you look at the photographs of the nuclear power plant, Fukushima power plant, behind the power plant, they piled up this huge container of radioactive waters. And within the next 1.5 years, there was no place to hold this water. So I don't know what are they going to do with this, the huge amount of radioactive water. But the radioactive water released into water, the seawater, and God knows, what kind of fish is irradiated.
咁我有少少我自己將都係學翻嚟㗎上網咁樣。咁關於嗰個輻射劑量同埋個人體健康關係，咁即使有學校嗰個 Physics Lab 都有一幅圖咧，就顯示咧話如果咧100個 millisievert 以下咧，人就冇事嘅；100以上咧先至會對人體有害。咁我再翻查資料咧，其實係講緊呢樣嘢㗎。如果100個 millisievert 以上嗰啲咧，就會產生個確定效應，即係 determined effect。所有人受咗呢一個劑量咧，都會有一啲急性嘅輻射疾病嘅病徵顯示出嚟嘅，嗰個叫做 Q radiation syndrome 咁樣。咁如果100以下咧，有個隨機效應咯。咁就係咁嘅，即係例如1萬人裏邊，大家都受多咗1個 millisievert 咁少嘅啫。咁裏邊會統計出咧，嗰個人口裏邊會多一個人咧喺一生裏邊咧會患癌而死嘅咯。所以話其實咧，我而家我所知嘅咧就係。即係科學界公認嗰個輻射劑量同埋人體嗰個效應咧係linear long threshold model， 即係咧輻射咧冇一個安全水平嘅，任何少少嘅劑量咧都會增加嗰個患病嘅風險，都係對人體有傷害。咁我而家成日都會喺傳媒或者係啲甚至乎展覽甚至乎一啲所謂專家講嘅嘢咧，都係會有時話100個 millisievert 係冇問題嘅。其實佢講緊佢冇講清楚咧。佢係指緊一個確定效應，但係咧其實個隨機效應咧，即使多少少咧，都係會有影響。咁我所知係一樣。
我想問下咧，即係其實響早期即係初開始戰後開始推展核能嘅時候咧，咁就即係一般人或者唔認識，咁所以會支持和平使用即係核。咁唔出奇，咁但係去到70年代呢個三里島事件同埋呢個切爾諾貝爾事件之後，點解日本裏邊係咪即係個民眾對於呢個即係核能仍然咁信任咧？係點解？唔敢做呢啲
Professor, is conceivable that people are ignorant back in 50s, before the females incident and Chernobyl incident. Therefore, they are deceived to support nuclear energy. But why didn't there an increasing opposition to nuclear energy after these nuclear accidents? Yeah.
Nuclear accident. Well, after Fukushima, of course, there's a similar thing. Oh, I see. Okay. Yes. Actually, there was a big movement shortly after 3 Mile Island. Although 3 Mile Island wasn't, but the quite large anti-nuclear campaign was spread all over Japan shortly after Chernobyl accident. Now that was also initiated by a group of women, mothers. You know, there's always that anti-nuclear movement actually initiated by mothers. That's quite natural because they have children. In this case, I don't know why in Shikoku Island, that's far away from Tokyo or a few, many other places. There was no nuclear, or the nuclear power plant in Shikoku was one. But Ehime region, there's a group of women actually started this campaign. But in those days, there was no email. So they using a chain letter movement. So, once you write the anti-nuclear campaign letters to your friends and asking your friends to disseminate these letters. So, if you send 10 letters to your friends, and then these 10 people, disseminated hundreds or whatever. So, the widespread movement went, along Japan from Hokkaido to Kyushu in a very short period. So it lasted only, but it lasted only one a year, 2 months or so, because very strong counter campaign by electric power companies and electricity utility companies like Hitachi, Toshiba, you name it, and also government. They paid a huge amount of money to popular singers, actors, actresses, scientists, you name it. So they came on a new TV screen and said, well, we have a top technology. There is nothing like Chernobyl. Chernobyl-like accidents will never occur in Japan. And we have a top technology. We have safe technology. There's no way that we will have a nuclear accident, major nuclear accident. That was a campaign. So this strong the counter campaign promoted by the Japanese government and the corporations. So that quickly died down. This anti-nuclear movement died down. So that was unfortunate. But for example, there's a guy called Hirose. He was very a good writer and good speaker. He's still alive. He's still very active. He wrote a book called "Build the Nuclear Power Plant in Tokyo." Because Tokyo is the city which uses largest amount of energy in Japan. So why can't we? If the governments and the corporations say if it's so safe, why don't we build a nuclear power plant in Tokyo? And so this book became a best-selling book in Japan, but only for a short period. People forgot. So it's completely forgotten. Or it only happens in overseas. It will never happen to Japan. That was the propaganda. Although even after Chernobyl accident, we had a major accident one after another. Although it's not so big, but the minor accident, it's called minor, but it's still major accident in Niigata, Shizuoka, you name it. At various places, the accident happens, but quickly covered up by the electric power companies and government. So this is the human habit that if you're not exposed to this serious problems immediately, you don't think about it. This is the problem.
But last week, 我等下都用廣東話。咁前個星期郡山縣嗰位有位女士咧，咁我都同佢訪問佢嘅時候，佢都有提到咧，即係喺郡山咧，一般人都唔認為咧，即係輻射同核能係兩樣嘢嚟嘅。即係佢哋怕輻射，但係咧佢哋覺得唔係我哋怕輻射，但係就唔反對核能咁樣咯。咁即使喺福島即係呢個事件之後，都仲有咁樣嘅態度，咁點解咧？或者知唔清楚？
So there's some local resident in Fukushima. They believe that the radioactivity and nuclear energy are separable. That they are opposed to radioactivity, but they are not opposed to nuclear energy. Can you explain why such mindset exists?
Nuclear weapons and
no, nuclear energy and radioactivity.
Even after separate. Maybe I can explain it.
They're opposed to the harmful radioactivity, but they are not opposed to nuclear energy.
You mean that they are aware of the radiation problems, but they didn't go against the nuclear?
Yeah, now.
Even now.
Yeah, even now.
Yeah. If this, again, that the Japanese government is using propaganda, saying that the radiation level is not very high. But the problem is, for example, I told you that the problem is, for example, that's called official monitoring machine. The official monitoring machine is always set in a public place, like in front of the city council or library, with the concrete floor. Okay, so that the rain wash away the radiation. So but they made an announcement that according to the monitoring machine, the level is 0.03 millisievert, whatever. But if you go to the different place, for example, the park where children are playing, the soil, it's not concrete. For example, in the Koriyama, there was a guy who actually was a grandfather. Because of the grandchildren, his grandchildren play in the playground, he was so concerned. So he went to the park nearby, and he measured, and it's the 7.5 millisievert, not 0.05. So you don't believe it. You never trust that the government, the public record. But that's the campaign that they're using, somehow the large number of people are somehow brainwashed again. But I don't know. As I said, in 10 years' time, there will be a large number of, people who will be suffering from cancer, leukemia. I don't know. Then they will start worrying about it. So by then it's too late, So somehow we have to learn from Hiroshima experience that, or Chernobyl experience, even Chernobyl. The thyroid cancer case started appearing in 3 years' time, so in Fukushima we have already 10 children suffering from thyroid cancer. So in 2 years' time, there will be more, unfortunately. So somehow we have to, press the Japanese government to, reconsider what they're doing. But the problem is, they're always trying to say, well, the radiation problem is solved, the power plant is now under control, etc., etc. Because you see that. There are several reasons, but one of the major reasons is that they are trying to export the nuclear power plant to overseas. You know, for example, Hitachi, Toshiba, they are very much interested in exporting nuclear power facilities to overseas. For example, Vietnam. Vietnam is now interested in buying a nuclear power plant from Japan, and somewhere Middle East too. And United States, for example, General Electric Motors is actually owned by Hitachi. You know, Hitachi is now operating the nuclear power plant, building nuclear power plant in the United States because Obama changed policy. Okay. So Obama is now allowed the U.S. electric power companies to build more nuclear power plants. But Hitachi and Toshiba had an interest in that. So, you know, you can't say, the Japanese government said, well, we'll stop, you know, then the big corporation will have a problem. So, you know, they will, and also the problem, another problem is even the trading companies, like Itochu, Mitsubishi, or Mitsui trading corporations, because they invest a huge amount of money in the uranium mines in Australia, Canada. Because they bought up the uranium for the next 10 years or 15 years. They already invested a huge amount of money. So they can't say, well, we stop it. Well, why can't we sell the uranium that they already invested? So it's all related to the economy. You know, but it's very, very short-sighted, isn't it? You know, the large number of people will suffer because of radiation problems. Tens of thousands of people will suffer. Yet, you know, they are concerned about just the profit that the handful of corporations are making at the sacrifice of the large number of civilians. That's what I'm saying. This is a criminal act. So somehow we have to stop it. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. But so as I said, you know, people, unless you're exposed to this, the problems, serious problems immediately, you don't think about it. For example, last year, March 11, I was invited to New York. Shamefully, I didn't know that there was a big nuclear power plant in New York, close to New York. It's only 50 kilometers away from the New York City, Manhattan. It's called Indian Point, and 25% of the electricity is provided by, you know, they consumed in New York is provided by the Indian Point, and this is a very old nuclear power plant, but still, you know, U.S. is still, you know, wanted to keep using this nuclear power plant, and. So if the accident happened in New York, it'll be disaster. You know, millions of people, where they run away? There was no way that they can run away because only, what, 2 bridges across to the, you know, from Manhattan to Queen areas, you know, other areas, only 2 bridges. The people run away. The millions of people should run away. And then there was the other way to run away is only boat. You know. In Hong Kong too. Imagine, you know, the Fukushima accident, like level, like, you know, the accident happened, say 50 kilometers away from what is called Shinshin. Yeah. Where are you going to run away? It's interesting that until, you know, recently that the New York was considered as a safe place as far as the earthquake is concerned. But in the last 5 years, earthquake, you know, happening in the New York region as well. So the earth is now very vulnerable. So we don't know where the big earthquake will hit. So you can't say the Hong Kong never had a, you know, major earthquake so far, luckily, but we don't know what will happen in the next 50 years. But once accident happens, you know, this is a serious problem. This is a serious problem. So we have to learn from that, from the bad experience in Fukushima, Chernobyl. You know, I mean, TEPCO is spending huge amount of money, not just compensation, but also, you know, the controlling this nuclear reactor, disastrous nuclear reactor, you know, 4 of them, actually 3 of them, but, you know, and it'll take years to you know, solve this problem. 20 years, 30 years, God knows. Look at the Chernobyl, still there, you know, having a problem. So the amount of money they, you know, they'll be using is just astronomical. There was no way that you know that they can continue that without support of government. That means we taxpayers pay. You know, we suffer from the radiation as well as the, and we also have to pay for that. You know, for the just one corporation, one electric power company, we have to pay for that. Is it reasonable?
Professor, talking about this Daya Bay near Hong Kong. Last night, a former observatory official, he retired, and then last night he spoke in another occasion, and people asked about this. And then he is saying something similar to the official line, and I want you to comment on this. He said, oh, Daya Bay is different from Fukushima. Fukushima is very old technology. And also they are very stupid to have the extra pumping, the extra electric power plant at the same level near the sea. So that's why when the seawater stoppage is disaster. But Daya Bay, our extra electricity power plant is safe. And then we have this so-called very strong concrete casing. It can contain these radiations. All these sorts of kinds of comment from the Hong Kong government, actually brainwashing that former observatory official first, and then coming to brainwash all of us. How are you going to answer?
Well, for example, in Japan now, the NHK is the public corporation, the TV corporations, is introducing a documentary film on the technological problems of the Fukushima power plant. I mean, NHK is usually controlled by government, but somehow on this topic is determined. They're determined to make, you know, the documentary film, you know, and telling the truth. And just last week there was one of the series I watched it, and there's, you know, very comprehensive technological device was produced. But for example, the one bulb should be opened after the accident. But because of the incredible heat and pressure, it didn't open. Because they never thought about it. Because the scientists never thought about that the temperature would go such a high. So they never thought about it, and because of the heat pressure, you couldn't open it. You know, and it was miraculous that the number 3 reactor didn't explode like Chernobyl. Actually, the TEPCO technologists, of course, they didn't appear. You know, they didn't show the face. They just, you know, verbal statement was broadcast, and they said, we thought this would be the end of the world. You know, this will be like a Chernobyl, and I'm going to die. Not only, you know, me, but the entire Japan will be irradiated. You know, but it was miraculous that it didn't happen. Because of this, you know, this technological problems. I don't know, but anyway. So there are various problems that the scientists thought they said, you know, double safety measurement, or, you know, there's a triple measurement, safety measurement, or etc., etc. But one after another, the problems created, and you know, it caused this final problems. So, you know, of course you can't test it, you can't experiment it, you know. So you have, only in theory they're thinking about this, you know. But the problem was, another problem was that the highway, the tide of, you know, seawater comes in. They never thought about it. You know, such a high, you know, wave will hit a power plant, and 10-meter high. They never thought about it. So, well, that's well, if it's the earthquake happened and the tsunami comes, it's only 2-3 meters. That's the highest thing that they're thinking about. And 10 meters high, 15 meters away, there's no way that, you know, could see. So it's flooded. The entire power plant is flooded. They couldn't cope with this problem. So one after another, you know, the problems were created and you know, multiplied. The crisis was multiplied. And so even this, you know, safety measurement didn't work. So don't trust scientists.
Thank you, Professor. I just want to ask your opinion on how to respond to some of the arguments in favor of nuclear energy, such as considered attitude to pollution or lack of resources, because it seems to me that besides the issue of taking extra care of controlling and monitoring, the main argument in favor of nuclear energy is that there's a consideration for the environmental pollution.
I think that the Obama is one of them. You know, Obama changed the ideas, and so they're now promoting this the clean nuclear energy. But of course, that the once major accident happens, then you know it'll be a disaster. That we have to think about it. Another problem is the radioactive waste constantly created at the nuclear power plants. We have millions of tons of nuclear waste in the world. So what are we going to do with it? We're actually spending more oil, fuel, to store these radioactive materials. For example, imagine that you know we have to store, not just store, but we have to transport that huge amount of radioactive materials from one place to another place. We use oil, you know, and also we excavate you know the land to store the huge amount of the radioactive materials. Again, we use a machine. You know, we're not using electricity to move running these machines. Okay, oil again. A huge amount of oil is consumed to deal with nuclear waste. So, you know, it's not economical at all. I don't think that any electric power companies can operate, you know, the power plant with a profit, you know, major profit, without government help, financial. As far as the Japan is concerned, the nuclear waste problem, the electric power companies think the nuclear waste problem is a government problem. It's not our problem. See? Because you see, we are producing electricity for the benefit of people, and we are making profit. But you know, in the end, the government have to deal with nuclear waste problem. So we have in Rokasho, up in the Tohoku area, Aomori Prefecture, we have a storage at the moment, and a recycling plant. It's actually a huge amount of the government money. Means our taxpayers' money is injected into that facility. Without taxpayers' money, they cannot operate this. Okay, so it's not economical at all. I think it's better to use money. If we have that amount of money, it's better to use to develop the alternative, renewable sources, energy sources. For example, in Japan, we have we can use the earth, the thermal power. We've got the hot spring everywhere. And Toshiba actually has an excellent machine or the power facilities to use this, the earth's heat. But we are not using it. We're exposing to, New Zealand, where else? For example, New Zealanders came to Japan and said, you must have, this Toshiba, wonderful machine. Sorry, we're not having a single machine. This is absurd. Yeah, of course that we have to improve the solar energy, the technology more, but we've got money. If we have money to spend it for nuclear waste, we have money to, we can use the money for the alternative renewable sources. I don't know. That's my idea. I don't know what you think about it, but that's my idea.
喂，有少少再跟翻頭先彩雲嗰個問題咧，就係之前嚟同我哋講，即係福島嗰個情況嘅嗰位媽媽啦嚇，咁因為佢其實暑假嘅時候亦都嚟過嘅嚇，佢就同埋啲小朋友嚟即係避下輻射啊咁當時其實佢哋就已經講咗，就係話即使發生咗福島咁樣嘅慘劇，喺福島依然佢哋仲用緊政府嘅統一教材，入邊咧就話核電又平靚正嗰只啦嚇，安全啊又需要啊咁諸如此類嘅，咁係呢個係一個能源問題嚇，就喺嗰度討論，就係學校照教嘅。而講呢個問題嘅時候，講核能嘅問題嘅時候，從未提過福島，喺福島教都係。但係另一方面，就係當佢哋講都冇辦法唔講啦嚇，呢個即係福島嘅核災嘅問題嘅時候，佢哋會係話因為地震，所以有 radioactivity， 係地震震出嚟嘅，中間係唔出現核電廠呢三個字嚇，即係或者原子爐嗰三個字嚇。咁所以咧，呢個唔淨止係對小朋友嘅教育。對成人都係咁，咁所以佢哋喺暑期嚟嘅呢幾個媽媽，包括你 interview 嗰位咧，佢就話叫我哋話翻俾佢哋嘅小朋友聽，唔係地震震啲輻射出嚟嘅，係有核電廠漏啲輻射出嚟嘅，然之後就讓啲小朋友翻去話俾福島嘅成人知，係要咁。即係所以嗰個真係天羅地網咯，我諗嗰個遮蓋啊嚇，即係遮蓋真相嗰個力量。翻嚟聽下呢啲先。
Well, one housewife from Fukushima actually said that even after the Fukushima disaster, the local school curriculum are still using books that are praising nuclear energy and treat the nuclear energy as a problem of energy instead of a problem of disaster. And when they inevitably mentioned the Fukushima disaster, the book are just telling students that the accident occurred because of the earthquake instead of the nuclear power plant itself. So I think this is really a matter of indoctrination and misleading in the education system to both adult and child.
我想再跟一跟呢個落去，就係話，即係所以頭先我聽咗阿 Professor 嗰個 presentation 有時，即係關於喺呢個廣島點樣去 exploit 呢個廣島嘅人民去promote 呢個所謂 peaceful use of atom 嚇，即係我覺得呢啲嘅即係仔細嘅跟進呢啲嘅 research 嚇，按呢啲咁嘅情況咧，係非常之有意義有用嘅。 當日係咁樣做嚇，可能喺港島又咁樣做嚇，可能喺東京又點樣做，佢用咗個咩正力松太郎呢個咁嘅壞人去點樣去喺日本 promote 嚇呢個呢個所謂 nuclear 所謂 peaceful use of nuclear。喺唔同嘅國家又有佢唔同嘅故事嘅，即係有佢唔同嘅去做呢啲 promotion 啦嚇，嗰個手法嗰個手段喺佢唔同嘅歷史階段有另外啲嘢去引誘佢哋啊嚇，或者係唔讓啲國民知道啲嘢啊咁樣嚇。咁而即係呢個根本係層出不窮嘅，所以頭先講到話點解又出現三尾島，又出現呢個 Chernobyl， 搞嚟搞去。人都唔知道嘅嚇，當然有好多原因啦嚇，即係人好似話，即係唔係即刻死就唔知，即係唔願去知啦嚇，即係有時咁長遠去死咁多嘢憂慮，費事知啦，即係呢啲咁嘅因素。但係亦都有一啲要注意嘅就係、根本係咁多年來，喺唔同嘅地方，亦都有一個即係比較中央 level 嘅聯合國 level 嘅 IAEA 啊、ICRP 啊呢啲咁嘅機構，佢哋亦都係有舊橋，但係亦有新橋。新橋就包括頭先嗰位女士提到嘅一樣嘢，核能係咪減碳啊？呢個最紅㗎啦，核能係咪對而家我哋哇咁災難性嘅全球嘅氣候改變係好唔掂啊嚇？咁唔掂嘅時候係一個救星嚟啊！呢個係呢10零20年嚇，即係呢個氣候改變嘅呢個 discourse 入邊有意抑或無意唔知嚇走出嚟嘅其中一條新橋嚟嘅。總之就層出不窮。你出呢個咁嘅 Chernobyl 呢件事咩？咪大家搞一輪下，然之後話即係蘇聯啊又封閉啊，又共產啊，又黑人憎啊嚇，咁梗係搞啲咁嘅嘢啦咁嚇。出咗呢個福島咩嚇？咁係啦，又舊啦嚇。佢又唔知道蘇聯嗰個同埋當係三尾島嗰個都好新㗎啦嚇。於是就話福島嗰個太舊啦，咁諸如此類啊嘅嘢。但係真係好快就會忘記嘅，即係快到難以想像。譬如今年香港嘅311有啲咩咧？係嘛？即係都冇乜嘢係我哋喺度搞呢啲咁嘅研討會嚇。咁即係所以唔好再搞到你好難譯啦嚇！即係我想講嘅就話嗰個 there have been so many stories, real life stories of different places with the governments of different places and the electricity companies using different strategies to promote so-called peaceful use of the atom. And these stories are very important. We should keep document these stories and compare notes and compile them. Because there are new strategies coming up every, say, 5 years, 10 years. Now is the climate change, so-called climate change argument for nuclear technology. All these things we should document very carefully, including just Daiser said about the observatory guys now saying this and that and that. These arguments may not be used 10 years ago or 20 years ago in this place, but may not be in another place. But I think for us to keep our brain clear and not to lose memory so soon, I think all these stories should be compiled and we should make a concerted effort in East Asia or in anywhere.
I agree. The 2015, it'll be the 70th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay, in 2 years' time. Okay, and unfortunately, this will be the last time for the Atom survivors to make big announcement. Because there will be no 80 years anniversary for them. I don't think they will survive until 80 years old. So what I'm saying to people in Hiroshima, including air bomb survivors, saying we have to utilize this 2015 as the major event to, make aware that the danger of the radiation no matter what the radiation problem was, whether it's caused by the nuclear power plant disaster or the nuclear weapon test, or actual atomic bombing of Nagasaki, or the waste of nuclear radioactive materials or uranium mining, all aspects of the nuclear issues, we have radiation problems from the beginning to the end, right? From mining of uranium to the dealing with the nuclear waste. So what I'm saying that we have a world conference on the victimization of the people by radiation. So the World Conference of the Radiation Victims Conference in Hiroshima in 2015. And then, based on this conference, we should set up the information center so that we collect all the information, the radiation problems, no matter where it happens in the world, and we share the information, disseminate the information, collect the information, and share the information. Somehow we need this kind of facility, the information center. And Hiroshima will be the ideal place, I say. Now, I keep saying this to the people in Hiroshima, but especially in Japan, we are now somehow dealing with this Fukushima problem. That's the really time-consuming, energy-consuming. So we haven't got the energy to think about 2 years ahead. This is sad, but this is the fact that But I still keep saying that we should have this kind of conference. And then, sadly, that the Hiroshima City Council, mayor of our city, saying in 2015 we will invite the NPT conference to Hiroshima. I don't think NPT is interested in coming to Hiroshima. NPT, you know that. NPT is actually an organization created by the nuclear power countries like United States and Russia and China. You see, where the nuclear weapons they hold. So they're not going to give up the nuclear weapons. They want to monopolize nuclear weapons. NPT is a system to monopolize nuclear weapons. So what the purpose of the bringing of the NPT conference in Hiroshima in 2015? There were no actual solution for nuclear weapons, even inviting the NPT conference in Hiroshima. But anyway, that's the politician think about it. It's sad, but as I said, we need some kind of world center to share the information about the radiation problems.
朋友咧想問下問題或者發表意見。
教授可唔可以講一講咧？啱啱頭先講即係呢個方向，呢個資源中心真係好重要啊！除咗呢個之外，有冇即係可唔可以講多少少你同世界各地嘅聯絡反核嘅過程裏邊有啲乜嘢成功嘅例子，有啲乜嘢新嘅方法？因為我哋講緊一路都講緊即係核電廠又好，政府又好，係好多反核電嘅一啲 strategy 出嚟咧，係洗腦好犀利嘅咁。即係話我哋要推動反核，更加需要更好嘅策略同埋方法啦。有啲可能德國比較成功，各樣呢啲嘅唔同嘅方法同資源，可唔可以同我哋分享？
So, Professor, apart from the information center you just mentioned, is there any new kind of anti-nuclear campaigning strategies that you know about in all over the world? Because, as you just said, the government and electricity company have adopted many new strategies over the time. So, is there any anti-nuclear campaigning strategies that you notice about?
Or would you like to leave it till tomorrow?
No. It's very difficult because you see somehow people don't think about the nuclear weapons and nuclear energy issues are combined issues. You know, still, I mean, we talked about this cases in Japan. People who are against nuclear weapons, but you know, they supported the nuclear arguments for peace. To some extent, it's the same problem. You know, the rest of the world too. People think, yeah, well, you know, okay, the nuclear weapons are bad, but as somebody suggested, that the clean energy, as a clean energy, we should utilize nuclear energy. So how to break this myth that, you know, this is very difficult, you know, because of the myth created by the United States, not just the United States, but nuclear power countries. You know, somehow, without using nuclear power plants, the human race will you know, collapse. I mean, that's the opposite. If we continue to use nuclear power, you know, nuclear energy, the human beings will disappear. You know, it's not just the human beings, but the environment. All creatures, living creatures, are destroyed by radiation. This is a problem. So I don't know how to make, you know, this issue so violent and aware of, you know, the world. So I'm in Japan. I'm doing taking all sorts of strategy. One way is to make clear that as I said, that the use of nuclear energy, no matter what it was, you know, as a nuclear weapons or nuclear energy, it's a criminal act. So we are conducting People's Tribunal on nuclear power. Actually, I started with my friend and 3 other friends. We are acting as judges. And we invite the victims of radiation, mainly from Fukushima, and hold the hearings. So far we had hearings in Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, Koriyama, Sapporo, Yokkaichi, and we're going to have next month, in May, we're going to have a hearing in Kyushu, Minamata, and then eventually we have a final hearing in Tokyo, July 20 and 21. It'll be a big event. So the purpose of this tribunal is just making, you know, aware the people, you know, the use of nuclear energy as a criminal act. So we're not just you know, using moral issue, but also legal examination. We're using international law, Japanese constitution to examine the use of nuclear energy. So, you know, one way to do it is just to make aware, you know, the use of nuclear energy is a criminal act. Some people say this is exaggeration, but I don't think this is exaggeration. So probably we need a world people's tribunal. You know, yeah, international tribunal on the nuclear energy.
咁我諗今日咧個時間差唔多，不過咧聽日咧同埋禮拜2咧都有2場講座咧，都係田中美幸教授主持嘅。咁聽日咧3點半咧就喺油麻地百老匯電影中心1樓咧就田中美幸教授咧會繼續講咧日本咧點樣推動呢個和平使用核能啦，同埋咧會講下咧日本當下嘅反核運動，同埋頭先提到嗰個咧核能民眾法庭。咁大家咧如果想了解多呢個核能民眾法庭係關於啲乜嘢嘅咧，或者點樣運作嘅咧，咁咧陣間可以出到去買呢一本書福島誓言。咁裏邊有篇文章咧就都係田中美幸教授寫嘅，咁我哋咧就譯咗做中文。咁好新嘅呢篇文，應該第6揾到啦。咁我哋今日咧就係啦，去到呢度，咁我哋聽日去繼續。